Stand up! Stand up!
Get off that.
Today we will cover the Chad Doerman case. This case highlights a perpetrator's obsessive need for control. Perpetrators often view their partners and children as possessions to be dominated rather than as individuals with their own rights and autonomy. When this control is threatened, whether through a partner's increasing independence or plans to leave the relationship, some perpetrators resort to extreme measures to reassert their dominance. In Chad Doerman's case, this manifested in a horrifying plan that allegedly took at least 8 months to formulate. This extended period of premeditation reveals the calculated nature of his actions and underscores how deeply ingrained his need for control had become. Rather than face the loss of power over his family, Chad chose to destroy it entirely, showcasing the dangerous lengths to which some abusers will go to maintain their perceived authority. Chad Doerman's actions reveal the worst extent of spousal revenge, a motive identified in some cases of filicide, the harming of one's own children. In such instances, the perpetrator targets what their spouse values most, their children, as a means of causing the ultimate harm. This twisted logic prioritizes the desire to hurt a partner over the natural parental instinct to protect one's offspring. Chad stands out for his cold, methodical execution and the lack of remorse he displayed in the immediate aftermath. On June 15, 2023, New Richmond, Ohio became the scene of an unthinkable tragedy. Chad Doerman, a 32-year-old father, lived with his 34-year-old wife, Laura, their 3 boys, Clayton, 7, Hunter, 4, and Chase, 3, and his teenage stepdaughter from a previous relationship. The family resided in a modest house along Laurel-Lindale Road. To neighbors and acquaintances, they appeared to be an ordinary family. The boys were active in youth baseball, with Chad seen at games instructing them to buckle up in their car seats after matches. Chad worked full-time as a member of the Insulators Union, while his wife Laura stayed home with their 3 sons and daughter Alexis. Behind closed doors, the Doerman household was far from the idyllic image it presented to the outside world. Chad exhibited a pattern of erratic behavior and explosive anger towards his family. His controlling nature manifested in frequent outbursts, during which he would yell at his loved ones and impose his will through various means he deemed necessary. One incident that stands out as particularly odd occurred in January during a snowfall. In the middle of the night, around 11 p.m., Chad woke up his entire family and insisted they go outside to build a snowman. He justified this unusual timing by expressing concern that the snow might melt before they had a chance to engage in this family bonding activity. While building a snowman might seem like an innocent family activity on the surface, the context of this incident reveals Chad's controlling tendencies. Forcing his family to go outside in the dark, with temperatures in the 20s, to fulfill his sudden desire for family time demonstrates a disregard for their comfort and autonomy. This event, though not overtly violent, illustrates Chad's compulsion to dictate his family's actions and his willingness to prioritize his whims over their well-being. The photograph from the very next day shows Chad and his wife Laura sledding together in broad daylight. The image presents a stark contrast to the previous night's family activity. This portrays a moment of apparent marital happiness and outdoor enjoyment. By posting this image rather than one of the previous night's forced snowman building session, Chad demonstrated a keen awareness of how he wanted his family to be perceived by others. This incident, seemingly minor in isolation, takes on a more sinister tone when considered as part of the larger pattern of control that ultimately culminated in the tragic events of June 15, 2023. On June 14th, he woke his stepdaughter up before leaving for work around 4 a.m., telling her he loves her and apologizing for whatever I've done to you and for anything I've done to hurt you. Later that night, Chad coached his son Clayton's baseball game the night before the murders. The entire family went to the baseball game. The morning of June 15th began like any other in New Richmond. The weather was cloudy with temperatures around 81 degrees. Chad Doerman left work early. He called his mother to tell her that he was having some confusing feelings. She suggested that he go to the little clinic, inside a Kroger. He went inside only to find that no one was at the clinic counter. He was impatient and proceeded to look through the aisles. Then he bought a 16-ounce Bud Light before arriving home and going to his shed. When his family returned from running errands, the boys were happy to see their father. Chad played with them while his wife Laura prepared lunch. During lunch, Chad made an ominous comment to Laura, saying this will be his last good meal. Around 12:50 p.m., Chad called his father and reportedly said, "Clayton's gonna be the hardest." After lunch, Chad did yard work and played with his children. Around 3:30 p.m., he began reading the Bible to his son Hunter. Chad was walking around the house with the Bible, mumbling, "Chad knows what's right," repeatedly. He read a section in the Bible that states, "You kill your first, second, and third born, but first you're supposed to kill your wife." He then opened the gun safe, leaving it unlocked, which worried Laura. When she expressed her concern, Chad dismissed it, saying he was just playing around. As 4 p.m. approached, Chad repeatedly told his boys that he loved them and that they had done nothing wrong, calling them the best boys ever. The family then went to lie down in the primary bedroom. Suddenly, Chad jumped up. His family, believing he intended to harm himself, began pleading with him not to do it. The situation quickly escalated. Laura reached for a phone to call 911, but Chad grabbed it and threw it across the room, saying, "It's too late." Chad then shot his son, Hunter, multiple times, hitting him in the torso, stomach, and twice in the head. As Laura attempted to revive Hunter, Chad chased after Clayton, shooting him twice in the head. Laura managed to retrieve her phone again and call 911. The following audio is the 911 call of the horrific scene and the final moments of Chad's son pleading for his life.
My husband shot my baby! Hitting everyone! 1965 went down!
I can't tell what's happening, ma'am. I need you to calm down and tell me what's happening.
Help me, God, help me!
Ma'am.
He's hurt! He's hurt, God! He's hurt! My baby!
What is happening?
Hey, come on, run! Run! This is...
Ma'am, what is happening?
Oh my God!
Hello? Hello? If anybody can hear me.
During this chaos, Chad's stepdaughter Alexis picked up Chase and tried to save him. As they tried to escape, Chad pursued them, forcing Alexis at gunpoint to put Chase down. Chad immediately pulled the trigger, however, his magazine was empty. Alexis ran down the street until she reached a nearby firehouse, crying out that her stepfather was killing everyone in their family. A concerned driver who witnessed the girl's distress immediately called 911. The caller attempted to have Alexis remain with her until the police arrived. However, she was insistent on remaining with her family because she felt she needed to protect them. While Chad reloaded, Laura fought with him, even placing her hand over the rifle barrel to protect Chase. Despite her efforts, Chad regained control and killed Chase in front of Laura. After the shootings, Chad lined up the bodies of all 3 boys in the yard on display. Chad sat on the side stoop watching Laura's desperate attempts to revive the boys. When deputies arrived at the Doerman home, they discovered a horrific scene. The 3 young boys had been shot and killed. Their mother had sustained a gunshot wound to her hand while attempting to protect her children. During his arrest, Chad made several statements that prosecutors later considered to be admissions of guilt. He reportedly said things like, "I did it, and take me to jail." He also expressed remorse, saying he shouldn't have shot the victims. It's worth noting his demeanor throughout the arrest. He is extremely calm given the fact he just slaughtered his family. Chad provides information about his stepdaughter's whereabouts and the overall situation. He even requests to stand up at one point as he is uncomfortable lying on the ground in cuffs. The request seems ridiculous given the absolute trauma he has just caused his family.
Stand up! Stand up! Stand up! Stand up now! Stand up! Stand the fuck up!
EMS to stage and air clear is going to go ahead and fly whenever any units can advise.
Get your hands out here.
72.
Tell them we're 21. Send the air.
If those guys can confirm that there's people that need first aid, and that's the shooter who's not complying, they need to take care of the
I got it.
victims. They have to shoot him and shoot him.
Man, I ain't trying to hurt nobody. I'm completely sober. Never did drugs a day
63,
in my
we're
life.
21. Get the EMS over here.
Well, I did drugs when I was little, but I don't do drugs now. I'm sober. I'm not trying to fight you.
He took my life from me! My life!
What are you doing, man?
Hey, are you copying all this?
Can I roll over? I ain't gonna hurt you. I ain't gonna hurt
You
nobody.
got anything on you?
No, I ain't got nothing, man. Phone, that's it. I ain't mad. I ain't nothing. Just make sure that dog don't come out. I don't think he'll bite you. Just don't reach for him and try to grab him and pet him.
All right.
He won't bite you.
What's going on, man?
Nothing. Can I stand up? It's kind of uncomfortable.
I'm gonna
I
get
ain't
you
gonna
here
do
in a
nothing. I ain't running
second.
away. You can do whatever you want with me.
Sit down.
It's my stepdaughter.
Put him in the cage.
This is Will. This is Will.
Chad Doerman's behavior during and after his arrest provides significant insights into his mental state and raises important questions about his legal strategy. During his arrest, Chad displayed a level of awareness and cooperation that seemed at odds with the horrific nature of his actions. He was able to articulate what he had done to his sons and provide information about his stepdaughter's whereabouts, indicating a clear understanding of the events that had transpired. This level of coherence and cooperation is not uncommon among perpetrators of domestic violence. Often they attempt to appear accommodating and natural in their interactions with law enforcement, possibly as a means of maintaining control over the narrative or minimizing the severity of their actions. In Chad's case, his willingness to assist the officers and his seemingly calm demeanor created an unsettling disconnect between his behavior and the tragedy he had just orchestrated. However, it's crucial to note that Chad's apparent emotional detachment does not necessarily indicate a lack of awareness regarding the wrongfulness of his actions. His initial plea of not guilty by reason of insanity would later be contradicted by his behavior during arrest, which demonstrated a clear understanding of what he had done. Chad's decision to remain at the scene, sitting on his stoop awaiting the arrival of law enforcement, is particularly telling. While this could be interpreted as a sign of remorse or surrender, it more likely aligns with the theory that his primary motivation was to inflict maximum emotional damage on his wife, Laura. This behavior suggests a deeply calculated act of cruelty. By forcing her to witness the deaths of her children and then frantically attempt to save them, Chad created a scenario of unimaginable horror for his wife. His presence at the scene forced Laura to confront not only the loss of her children, but also the person responsible for their deaths. The aftermath of the murders led to intense legal proceedings and interviews. During Chad Doerman's initial questioning, his responses revealed a mix of evasion and unconscious admission. When asked about the number of children he had and who shot them, Chad claimed ignorance. However, when listing his children's names, he did so in the order in which he had killed them, rather than by age as most parents would. This subtle detail potentially betrays his focus on the murders rather than on his children as individuals. The contrast between Chad's demeanor in this interview and his earlier behavior captured on Bodycam footage is striking. While he appeared coherent and responsive during his arrest, in this later questioning he presents as more confused and distant. His speech becomes muffled and he seems disconnected from the reality of his situation. This shift in Chad's presentation could be interpreted in several ways. It might reflect the genuine onset of shock or dissociation as the gravity of his actions begins to sink in. Alternatively, it could be an early attempt to appear less competent, possibly with the legal consequences of his actions in mind. As we analyze this portion of the interview, it's important to consider how this change in demeanor might factor into the broader narrative of Chad's mental state and legal strategy.
How many children do you have?
4.
What are their names?
Hunter, Clayton, Chase, And Alexis.
Hunter, Creighton, Chase, and Alexis. Did you shoot your son?
No.
Who did?
I don't remember. What happened?
That's what I want to ask you. What happened today? I don't know. I wasn't there.
I don't know what happened today. What happened?
During another segment of Chad Doerman's interrogation, he contradicted his earlier claims of not remembering what happened to his children. In a chilling revelation, Chad admitted to recalling his wife's desperate attempts to prevent him from pulling the trigger. He went even further, stating that he should have killed her first. Chad's specific phrasing, "That's why you have to do her first," appears to reference a supposed Bible verse he claimed to have read about the order in which one should kill their family. This statement provides a disturbing glimpse into Chad's thought process and attempts to justify his actions. By framing his crimes within a religious context, Chad seemed to be trying to deflect from the more likely motive of revenge. This admission not only contradicts Chad's initial claims of memory loss, but also reveals a level of premeditation and twisted logic behind his actions. His recollection of these details and his reference to a specific order for the killings suggest a more calculated approach to the murders than he had previously admitted.
You know, this is heavy on you, and it's something that you couldn't sleep because you knew that day was coming and it was building. And that's why you couldn't work today. You knew it had to be done, and you came home.
Do you remember your wife trying to stop you from shooting your children?
That's why you gotta do her first.
Chad Doerman's behavior during his incarceration further undermined his defense team's strategy of pleading not guilty by reason of insanity. A particularly revealing moment occurred during a phone call with his mother while he was in jail. His mom adored her grandchildren. She frequently posted her admiration for the boys on his Facebook page. Despite Chad's actions, she still cares deeply for her own son. In this recorded conversation, Chad expressed a desire to speak with his wife, but his mother informed him that Laura had no interest in hearing from him. Throughout the call, Chad's mother appeared to cling to the belief that her son had no recollection of his actions, likely as a coping mechanism to reconcile the horrific nature of his crimes. However, Chad quickly dispelled this notion, catching his mother off guard with his frank admission. He not only acknowledged remembering the events, but also demonstrated awareness of his motives. This candid conversation starkly contrasted with the insanity defense his legal team will pursue. Chad's mother's audible shock at his admission highlights the difficulty many family members face when confronted with the reality of a loved one's heinous actions. Her attempt to rationalize his behavior by suggesting he couldn't remember the incident was swiftly countered by Chad's clear recollection and understanding of his own motivations. This exchange provides a glimpse into the complex emotional turmoil faced by families of perpetrators and further complicates the legal narrative surrounding Chad's mental state at the time of the murders.
No, I was going to call her.
You probably should not call her Chad. I mean, your mother telling you this.
No, yeah. Should be right there.
You took away everything. And I know you don't remember it. And you know only what they tell you. But she remembers.
No, I remember everything.
You do?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Write down. I'm not talking about nothing. Because you said you didn't. I know you don't. You're lying.
No, I swear to God I do. Yep. All the way to the point, and all the way to all the reasons why and everything.
According to statements Chad later made to investigators, he had been contemplating killing his sons for at least 8 months. The burden of these thoughts had become so overwhelming that Chad claimed he hadn't slept for 3 or 4 days before June 15th. The admissions he made to investigators were thrown out of court because they failed to properly advise Chad of his Miranda rights and ignored his request for an attorney. Chad's father, Keith Doerman, agreed to an interview after the killings. He stated that Chad had told him he just snapped. Keith elaborated, saying there was something going on in his life that he couldn't handle anymore. However, this contradicts his son's admission that he had fantasized about committing such a crime. prosecutors initially sought a $20 million bond for Chad. During the trial, the prosecution emphasized the heinous nature of the crimes, describing Doerman's actions as one of the most monstrous, craven, cowardly acts they had ever encountered. The prosecution initially pursued the death penalty, citing the premeditated nature of the murders and the vulnerability of the victims. Chad pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. The defense claims Chad was delusional and in psychosis when the crime happened. There was a law passed in 2021 in the state of Ohio that stated that someone up for the death penalty could not have a mental illness at the time of the crime. The mental illness stance is the crux of the defense's argument, so they pushed for the death sentence to be taken off the table. However, his actions in the body cam footage directly after the crime did not reveal that he was unaware of the wrongfulness of his actions. We also know he admitted to thinking about this crime for months on end, which shows his premeditation. The following audio is part of a jail call between Chad and his brother. Chad compares himself to Hitler. He found amusement in the publicity of his crimes. This also reveals further that he is aware his actions were wrong and harmful. He seems to take pride in what he did to his family.
To the psychiatrist? Fuck no. What was that going to do? I'm going to be sitting in this dress tomorrow. It ain't doing me no good. Why am I going to go talk to her? She looked at me and she goes, do you feel bad for what you did? No. And she's just like, okay. And then that was it. That was the end of the conversation. And then she looked at everybody and said, he's not a threat to himself. That's fucking awesome. Hey, they thought Hitler was a big dude. Fuck yeah, I'm matching him.
During the year to follow, there were many delays in finalizing Chad's sentencing, not just the defense arguing against the death penalty, but also due to difficulty lining up a judge qualified to handle the particular case since the previous judge was retiring. After a year passed, finally a trial was ramping up and at least firming up a date for it to begin. However, he agreed to plead guilty in exchange for life in prison without the possibility of parole in order to avoid trial and the possibility of the death sentence. Chad had waived his right to a speedy trial. Chad Doerman's mental state leading up to and during the murders reveals a complex and disturbing psychological profile. In the aftermath of killing his sons, Chad's behavior was notably calm. He sat on the stoop of his house watching his wife Laura's desperate attempts to save their children. This lack of further action or attempt to flee suggests a man who had accomplished his grim objective and was now detached from the horrific reality he had created. While no definitive motive has been established in Chad Doerman's case, his actions closely align with the spousal revenge category of filicide as described by renowned forensic psychiatrist Dr. Philip Resnick. In his seminal 1969 study published in the American Journal of Psychiatry, Dr. Resnick identified 5 primary motives for filicide. This type of filicide typically involves the perpetrator seeking to harm their spouse by destroying what the spouse values most, their children. It's a horrific form of emotional violence that goes beyond physical harm, aiming to inflict lasting psychological trauma on the surviving parent. In Chad's case, the calculated nature of his actions, particularly his decision to kill Chase in front of Laura, seems to fit this pattern. Chad's history of abusive behavior towards his family indicates a long-standing pattern of control. Domestic abuse often revolves around the abuser's need to maintain power and dominance over their victims. When this control is threatened, some abusers escalate their violence to extreme levels. It's possible that Laura may have shown signs of wanting to leave the relationship or assert more independence, which could have triggered Chad's desire for the ultimate revenge. The spousal revenge motive in filicide cases often emerges when the abuser feels they are losing grip on their family unit. Rather than accept this loss of control, they choose to destroy the family entirely. This twisted logic prioritizes the abuser's need for dominance over even the most fundamental human instinct of protecting one's offspring. In Chad's case, his apparent calm after the murders and his decision to remain at the scene further support this theory. By staying to witness Laura's suffering, he ensured that the full impact of his actions would be felt by his intended target. This behavior suggests that causing Laura pain was a primary goal, aligning with the spousal revenge motive described by Dr. Resnick. The method of the killings provides further insight into Chad's mindset. He used a rifle to execute his sons, choosing a method with high lethality rather than a more personal form of violence. For Chad, it was more about getting a job done rather than finding pleasure in the act itself. This suggests his primary goal was not to inflict suffering on the children themselves, but to cause maximum emotional damage to Laura. Chad's actions were methodical. He targeted only his biological sons, sparing his stepdaughter Alexis. He even made sure to kill Chase in front of Laura, emphasizing the performative nature of his violence. This level of calculation indicates a deeply disturbed individual who had likely been contemplating these actions for some time.